When I look back at the games that I've played in 2025, there's a lot to love. JRPGs have always been my favorite genre because they continue to experiment with a ton of new things. Sometimes they go in wild directions, and for me, the real joy of playing JRPGs isn't just about keeping up with the latest and greatest, it's about discovering games that maybe I haven't played yet, and this year has been amazing for that, as we've had some great re releases with remasters along with some incredible new titles. I kept track of the JRPGs I played, not the ones I kind of dipped into or bounced off pretty quickly, but the ones I actually really dug into and walked away from thinking, yeah, that was a really special time. There's no ranking here in particular, just 12 games that I've had an amazing time with and want to shine some light on in case anyone watching is looking for something new to play. Some are remasters, some are brand new games, some are weird in ways I genuinely love. So, with all that said, let's jump right into it. Tales of Grace's F was a long time gap in the Tales series for me. One that I wanted to play for a really long time, but just never got around to. So when it released this year, I thought now is the perfect time, and man, was I right. I adore this game so much. There's a reason it is still held as one of the best in the series in terms of combat, and the remastered version proves exactly why. In an era where action JRPGs are everywhere, this one still stands out for how buttery, smooth, and responsive it feels. No cooldowns, no unnecessary systems, just tight, skill based flow of combat. The remaster doesn't change the game's core identity either, but the polish is definitely welcome. Smoother performance, cleaner menus, better lighting, Grace's F finally looks as good as it plays. And yeah, it's still a little tropey story wise here and there, but I really love the characters here. They are some of my favorites in the entire series, and it kind of leans into those tropes with real sincerity, I think. There's a real warmth to the cast here, and the overall dynamic is just really great. Asbel starts off as your classic overeager protagonist, but he grows over the course of the game, and I really appreciated how his childhood decisions ripple into the adult timeline. The rest of the cast rounds it out really well, and it ends up just being one of the best JRPG parties I've ever experienced. It's also one of the few Tales games where the skits genuinely add emotional weight instead of just being, quirky filler. I actually looked forward to them in this game. Even the dungeon design feels thoughtfully paced. Nothing is overly complex, but enough spatial awareness and puzzle logic to keep you engaged between fights. If I had one big criticism of the game, it's all the backtracking you have to do toward the end, but it didn't take away from my love or my overall experience for this one. Grace's F Remastered isn't really a reinvention or a complete overhaul, remake, or whatever. It's a refinement of the base game, and I really loved it for that. There's still nothing quite like Xenoblade Chronicles X. Not in 2015, and still not to this day in 2025. It's the kind of game that doesn't just throw you into a big world, it urges you to get lost in it. The remaster tightens things up, less UI clutter, faster load times, and a much needed performance bump, but it doesn't change the game's overall feel, and that's good because X is about the freedom to explore. Mira isn't just any open world, it's open in every sense of the word. And as you progress through the story, you'll find that exploration expands in new and creative ways. The scale system, the giant mechs you eventually earn, still feels like this major thing to work toward in the game. It withholds it just long enough to make the payoff feel really great. Suddenly, the world that felt so huge on foot becomes something else entirely. Verticality opens up, battles shift, you start feeling much more powerful. Now, the narrative takes a backseat compared to the other Xenoblades for sure. There's lore, mystery, and big sci-fi questions, but it's more fragmented. Characters are hit or miss here and there, but that's kind of okay. You're here to scan and explore this alien continent for hours and find random caves, fight overleveled beasts, and I just loved every minute of it. Xenoblade X is weird, ambitious, and sometimes can be a little messy, but it's also bold in a way that's increasingly rare these days. I love this game, and I think everyone should definitely give this one a try. Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma definitely surprised me this year. I went in expecting a comforting, more cozy style game, and what I got was something a little different. Guardians of Azuma keeps the cozy core of the Rune Factory series, farming, cooking, marriage, town life, but it wraps it in a surprisingly deep action RPG loop. First off, the combat is actually good now. We're talking real weight, proper dodging, and and satisfying elemental interactions. It's the first time I felt like the battles in a Rune Factory game asked me to come with more focus and skill than what I'm used to in this series. The villages are amazing. Seasonal changes affect more than crops. They touch music, lighting, even character routines. There's a serenity to it all, but then you'll venture out into the corrupted zones and suddenly you're fending off elemental bosses and it's just a ton of fun. That contrast is super effective and it's really addictive. What really stood out this time was how story and systems actually talk to each other. Your farm isn't just there to be there, it plays into the larger ecosystem of the world. The corruption spreading across the land, you push it back with magic infused harvests. It's clever and it gives emotional weight to the otherwise relaxing mechanics at play. The characters are what you expect, but the writing's sharper and some of the romance arcs are very well executed. If I have one criticism, it would be the gameplay loop and pacing toward the end of the game. It carried on a little too long for my liking, but outside of that, every mechanic in this game is super well done. Guardians of Ozma doesn't reinvent the genre, but it makes everything click just a little better. It's the most fun I've had growing cabbage and slaying monsters, and it's definitely my favorite Rune Factory game. Now, I know many of you will see this entry on the list and think Expedition 33 isn't a JRPG, but I'll just say that it'll continue to be on my list of JRPGs simply because if you like JRPGs, I don't see how you couldn't enjoy a game that pulls inspiration from some of the best who have ever done it. Expedition 33 is exactly the kind of game I want more of. Thoughtful, tightly designed, and absolutely unafraid to get weird with its ideas. At its core, this is a game about inevitability. The world of Expedition 33 is caught in a literal countdown to its end, and only 33 days remain. Every decision, every battle, every conversation is filtered through this creeping sense of urgency, and yet it's not a game about complete panic. It's more about resolution, about choosing what matters when you know the end is coming. Mechanically, the combat takes clear cues from Persona and Final Fantasy, but it blends those influences into something tighter. Turn manipulation is the heart of the system, delaying, skipping, intercepting, and every move you make has to be weighed against the ticking doomsday clock. The UI is clean and legible, and it's quite easy to understand. It's a game that respects your time, even as it reminds you that that time is actually running out. But what really elevates this game is the writing. Your party isn't just a collection of misfits, there are people trying to reconcile with the legacy of the world that completely failed them. They argue, they mourn, they joke. There's a heavy, lived-in atmosphere to every campfire scene. The lore isn't just dumped on you either, it leaks in slowly through dialogue. Your exploration can unlock more lore and radio signals from long-lost civilizations, and the ending. Like, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, let's just say it really sticks, and not because it shocks you, more because it really earns the emotion it delivers. Expedition 33 is a small game with huge ambition. It reminded me that turn-based systems can still feel really fresh when they're rooted in real thematic purpose. This is one that's definitely going to stick with me for a while, and if you haven't played it yet, this is up there on the list of Game of the Year nominees for me. The Raito games have always felt like outliers in the SMT family. Part detective story, part monster raising sim, but these games were doing genre blending before it was really a thing. So when Raito Remastered dropped this year, I knew I had to dive in and play it because I've never played it before, and honestly, it holds up a lot better than I expected. This game is a really interesting take on the series. It blends detective work mechanics with all the SMT stuff you expect, like demon fusion and combat, but combat here is action instead of turn-based, and I actually really enjoyed it. Raito himself is a fantastic protagonist, silent, yes, but reactive in very interesting ways. I started the game up and immediately got Persona 4 vibes. I checked and this game released within a year of Persona 4, so there are some similarities in music and tone. So if you're into that kind of thing, I love the overall concept here, as it's not really like anything else out there. You're not saving the world here, you're solving mysteries, piecing together conspiracies, wrestling with what it means to live between these two worlds. The remaster does a lot of heavy lifting visually, much cleaner textures, more readable environments, and much better lighting. Combat's still a bit stiff by modern standards, but the depth is there if you engage with the demon partner mechanics and all the elemental weaknesses. More than anything, playing Raito Remastered reminded me of how experimental Atlas can be. This is a game with original and interesting aesthetics, and a talking black cat who's also your boss, which might be the coolest thing about this game if I'm being honest. There's nothing else quite like it, so I'd recommend to anyone who enjoys Atlas games, definitely check this one out. Feels a little strange calling Yakuza 0 a JRPG because for a long time, the series lived in its own weird genre space. Half brawler, half soap opera, with just enough RPG-like mechanics to get included in a list like this one. Also, I just need a reason to gush about this game because as someone who's only ever played Yakuza Like a Dragon with Ichiban and his crew, this one really grabbed me. I'll admit, the first 3 chapters basically play like a movie with almost no gameplay at all, but after that, things start to pick up quite a bit and I really enjoyed my time with it. I played it on the Switch too, and the director's cut isn't this radical overhaul. It's a clean remaster with better lighting, much sharper UI, some smoother frame rate and performance bumps, but they added English voice acting, which for a game like this, I'm kind of glad they did. I'd never played it before, and this one is actually pushing me to play the rest of the games in the series. What makes Yakuza 0 so compelling, even years later, is how it balances its tone. One minute you're body slamming a thug through a car window, the next you're getting emotional at some really heavy story beats. The emotional high points hit harder because the game isn't afraid to be completely ridiculous at times. It wants you to laugh, and then it wants to punch you in the gut with some monologue about loyalty or grief, and the RPG systems are quietly brilliant. You've got different fighting styles, side quests often reveal more about the characters in the main story, even the real estate cabaret club minigames feed into character growth in a way that's more narratively satisfying than most traditional XP systems. I love this game, so if you have a Switch 2, I'd say definitely pick this one up. Every now and then, a game comes along that doesn't feel like it's borrowing from the usual JRPG playbook. Kunitsugami is one of those games. Stylistically, it's very bold, mechanically distinct, and culturally rich in a way that really stuck with me. This game came to the Switch 2 and got all this attention, so that actually motivated me to start up the copy I purchased on PC back when it came out, and man, I really was shocked at how much this game hooked me in. This isn't your typical turn-based or action game formula. Instead, Kunitsugami blends real-time combat with tower defense strategy, all set against a backdrop that feels really original. You play as a divine warrior protecting a shrine maiden as she purifies the land from demonic corruption. But it's not just about hacking and slashing. You're managing villager units, assigning them roles like archers and guards, and you're positioning them strategically, and then joining the fray yourself when the sun sets and the yokai come crawling out. The result is a game that is part tactical planner, part stylish hack and slash. Every night cycle becomes a frantic balancing act, defending points of interest, managing cooldowns, and making split-second decisions about who to save and who to sacrifice. And honestly, it all looks incredible. The art direction is just so beautiful. Traditional Japanese aesthetic, environments look beautiful, and the more I played through it, the more I was amazed at all the original ideas at play here. It's not a traditional JRPG, but that's exactly why it stood out to me. I'd say it's a bit uncommon to see larger studios take risks, but Capcom obviously trusted Kunitsugami with its creativity, and it's one of the most distinctive experiences I've had all year. There's always been a kind of stubborn elegance to Bravely Default. It's a game that takes inspiration from classic Final Fantasy structure. It's got the 4 crystals, the job system, the magic spells, but it also isn't afraid to mess around with the groundwork here. The Bravely Default HD remaster doesn't just make it prettier, it gives the whole experience a second wind, reminding us why this game struck such a chord when it first landed. The visual overhaul is tasteful. Character models are sharper, the watercolor towns are even more vibrant, and the performance bump makes the battles feel snappier. That classic chibi aesthetic is still here, but now it feels more like deliberate style than a technical compromise. What stands out most still, to me, is definitely the combat. The Brave and Default system is one of the smartest turn-based mechanics of the past 2 decades. The ability to borrow actions from future turns or bank them for defending forces you to constantly think in terms of risk versus reward. Do you go all in now and hope for a quick kill, or play it safe and build for a burst later? It's elegant, it's flexible, and best of all, it makes grinding just as fun as boss battles. The job system is just as addictive as ever. Mixing and matching classes, unlocking synergy between them, breaking the game just enough to feel clever. This is min-maxing perfection, and it's supported by a steady stream of new tools right up to the end game. Now in HD on the Nintendo Switch 2, it's never been easier to appreciate just how finely tuned and delightfully broken this little throwback JRPG really is. Some games don't age all that well. Lunar definitely isn't one of those though. Playing through these games for the first time helped me realize just how ahead of their time these games really are. The Lunar Remastered release finally gives this cult classic the preservation it deserves, and I'm glad so many people out there got to experience these games for the first time. First off, the presentation is stunning. Sprite work is cleaned up, character portraits are redrawn with more fidelity, but still true to the original aesthetic, and the fully voiced anime cutscenes are now polished enough to feel timeless rather than a little outdated. The soundtrack also gets a remastered treatment that enhances the overall experience. What struck me most playing Lunar was how gentle it is. This isn't a grim, dark epic or a crazy story of deception. It's a hero's journey in the most classical sense. And while the setup might sound simple, the execution is anything but shallow. The writing has a sincerity that's rare in modern games, witty when it wants to be, sentimental when it needs to be. Turn-based combat is basic but still engaging thanks to the light spatial elements. Character positioning actually matters, and some fights force you to think about movement. More than anything, Lunar Remaster reminded me of a time when JRPGs weren't afraid to be earnest. No irony, no deconstruction, just an adventure that wears its heart on its sleeve, and sometimes that's exactly what I need. Saga Frontier 2 Remastered doesn't go overboard in remaking it from the ground up, but takes what I now would consider my favorite Saga game and just polishes the experience where it needs to. And to me, that's a really good thing. It preserves what made the original so distinct. Its unique structure, subdued tone, and watercolor world that still looks like nothing I've ever seen before. This isn't really a game about saving the world, it's about legacies of families, of nations, of pain passed down across generations. You don't play as a protagonist, you jump between two bloodlines, Gustav, a noble without magic exiled from his own kingdom, and Will Knights, a digger, scholar, and kind of a reluctant hero. Their stories intersect, echo each other, and span decades, giving the whole experience a kind of epic sweep that kept me hooked throughout. What the remaster adds is mostly technical. Cleaner visuals, widescreen support, better loading times, but the real draw is just being able to play this game with fewer barriers. Saga Frontier 2 asks a lot of you. It throws you into scenarios with very little context. It jumps time periods without warning. It forces you to piece things together, not just narratively, but honestly mechanically too. The battle system is deceptively deep. On the surface, it's a traditional turn-based affair, but under the hood, you're managing weapon durability, formation bonuses, and combo systems that require experimentation and memorization. There's a joy in cracking it, honestly, but the game never holds your hand. And the art, let's not skip over that. The hand-painted backgrounds in Saga Frontier 2 remain some of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in a video game. It's more like a storybook illustration than game environments. Combined with the whole moody, restrained soundtrack, the result is an atmosphere unlike anything else. This isn't a JRPG for everyone, but if you're willing to meet it on its own terms, Saga Frontier 2 Remastered offers something really rare and great. Atelier Yumiya didn't make the biggest splash this year, but it quietly became one of my favorite comfort games. And I say comfort with intention, not to dismiss it as light or forgettable, but to highlight just how good it is at creating space for a more slow, deliberate playstyle. This is one of the more introspective entries in the Atelier series, and the shift in tone really worked for me. Yumiya herself is probably one of the most grounded protagonists in the series. She's not aiming to become the world's greatest alchemist or save a kingdom. She's trying to understand the legacy of her mentor, rebuild a neglected atelier, and untangle a deeply personal magical mystery tied to her hometown. The smaller scale makes the emotional beats hit a little bit harder. When you succeed, it feels earned, and when you fail, it stings just a little bit more. Mechanically, Yumiya refines the already sharp systems of Ryza. Synthesis is more complex, but also more readable, more puzzle-like than ever, I think, but that's what I loved about it. It's easy to lose hours experimenting with different material combos just to see how it affects a trait or unlocks a recipe branch you hadn't considered, and if that's not something you're interested in, it has this, auto-build function. The combat's turn-based with a big emphasis on timing and resource balancing. It's not revolutionary, but it's punchy and stylish, and the addition of elemental tethering, where combining specific skills creates temporary field bonuses, gives you reasons to rotate characters instead of just sticking to your favorites. But what really stuck with me was the atmosphere. The world of Atelier Yumiya is serene without being completely empty. It feels lived in and warm and refreshingly hopeful. In a genre that often leans into world-ending stakes, Yumiya reminded me that small-scale stories, when done with care, can feel just as meaningful. There's a kind of sacred weight to the Suikoden name in JRPG circles. For years, those games sat in my backlog, constantly recommended to me by friends. So when the Suikoden 102 remaster finally dropped, it was a huge deal to me, and I was excited to play these. And playing through both of them reminded me just how ahead of their time these games really were. Suikoden 1 is the simpler of the two, structurally speaking. It's a brisk, focused tale about rebellion, loyalty, and the burden of leadership. You're not a chosen hero in the traditional sense. The 108 Stars of Destiny system gives your party an incredible sense of scale. And even though not every character gets a deep arc, there's a charm to seeing your castle fill up with recruits. It feels really great and is kind of addictive once you really get into it. Suikoden 2 is where it all clicks. The writing sharpens, the stakes deepen, and the villain is still one of the most chilling in the genre. The game never loses sight of personal relationships, even while charting the course of an entire war. The remaster does right by the source material. Sprites are crisp, character portraits are redrawn with respect for the originals, and the UI is smoother without being sterile. It doesn't overdo anything, it just makes these games more accessible, and that's all I ever really needed. I love these games, and it's made me want to go back and play more of the series. I love JRPGs with all my heart, and looking back on the games I've played this year, there's a ton of variety here. Some of them do things better than others, but they all were an amazing time and deserve your consideration for the next big thing to jump into. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this video or found something new to play, then hit the like button and subscribe for more JRPG content like this. But more importantly, drop a comment below and let me know what games you all have been playing this year. I can't wait until the end of the year and see just how many of these games make it into my final top 10. I look forward to reading your comments, and until next time, I'm out.